The snow is finally melting where I live, and I feel like spring arrived practically overnight. With the change of season, I feel like now is the perfect time to gather up my works in progress and take a look at them. I have gathered up all of my works in progress into this basket, and as you can see, I'm not exactly drowning in whips, although that probably depends what your definition of drowning in whips is. I think I counted 6 of these, and I don't exactly feel overwhelmed by them, but I did manage to kind of lose track of at least one of them. I forgot about at least one of them completely, actually. So I kind of thought, okay, let's gather them up and do a little recap of them. Let's go over them, and maybe as I do that, I can actually help myself remember what I've been doing and kind of get an idea of what I want to do with the project going forward, if I want to continue with it, and more importantly, how I'm going to continue with it. Let's go through these whips, and maybe by the end of this, I will gain a renewed sense of motivation to finish them. First up in my lineup of whips is a crocheted chatelaine bag, or a purse. It's been hiding in a cabinet for so long that I basically forgot about it completely. I used a crochet thread called Curio number 3 in the colorway Ciel. I wish I remembered exactly what these beads were, but I just found them floating around in a drawer without any label. I'm thinking they were probably size 60 seed beads, but I'm not exactly sure. The pattern I'm using came from the October 1900 issue of Home Needlework magazine. But rather than following any of the patterns exactly, I used one of the designs as a starting point. I followed the directions for the beginning of the bag, just how to shape the bottom of it, but after that I just followed a small portion of one of the bead charts, because I knew I definitely did not have enough beads for the entire motif. Somehow, miraculously, I had exactly the right number of beads for the pattern, down to the very last bead. After doing the beaded part, I started a mesh portion at the top, partially because I was getting bored with endless single crochet. I'm not sure if I should have started the mesh a little bit higher up on the bag, or if it looks okay as it is. I guess that sort of depends on how long I end up making the bag, but I don't really know at this moment. Let me know what you think about it. All in all, this project really shouldn't take much longer to finish. I just need to decide on the design going forward, and maybe I can get it done in a day or two. The next project is this here, which is about half of a vest. The yarn I'm using is from Knit Picks and called Gloss Fingering. I chose a brighter color than I might usually pick, so that I would definitely be able to see my work clearly, since this is my first time ever knitting lace. I've made this whole thing hard enough for myself already, so I figured being able to see my work was a good idea for the sake of my sanity. This particular pattern I found in one of my antique knitting books from my collection. This is the Bear Brand Blue Book Volume 25 from 1919. You likely know that vintage patterns can be much more vague than modern ones, and this book, being antique, certainly reflects that fact in the sparse directions and the fact that it comes in one single size. What size is that? I wish I knew too, because the pattern doesn't tell, other than giving a small hint for how long the cast-on stitches should measure. So there is a lot of math and a lot of hoping for the best with this one. I do enjoy the challenge, to a point, and I like that I gain new skills and more confidence around my knitting when I'm working through old patterns. But being someone that deals with quite a lot of fatigue, I can only work on this when windows of enough energy come around. So all of that combined is the reason I've taken a long time to get this far in this pattern. It's been about 8 months, I think, since I cast on. Overall, though, with all the challenges, I am very happy with how this is coming along, and I do want to continue on it and see it through to the end. I just have to keep working with the ebbs and flows of my energy and try not to get too annoyed at my own lack of energy or beat myself up about it. Next in the lineup of whips is this pile of yarn here. I started this one fairly recently when it sort of struck me in the face one day that winter is very much on its way out, and I would like to have something that is a bit more warm weather suited. The yarn I'm using here is called Shine Sport from, once again, Knit Picks, which seems to be very much a trend in this video. It is a cotton modal blend and is very soft with a light shine to it, which I guess makes sense. It comes across more in the stockinette stitch than in a textured crochet stitch. But since the body of the blouse will be in stockinette stitch, I think that shine should hopefully come across. So far for this project, I have these 3 crochet pieces that really don't resemble a garment much at all. But eventually it will become, as the pattern calls it, a blouse jumper. I was interested in the fact that this pattern combines knitting and crochet, specifically filet crochet, which I've wanted to make a garment with for quite a while. This one seemed like a good place to start, with the pattern being a relatively simple checkerboard. This long piece is the waistband, and although I had to change the gauge slightly so that it wouldn't end up too large, it was fairly easy to do because I just had to take a couple blocks off in the width and simply crochet enough blocks to get the length that I need. This rectangular piece is the yoke, which if I fold in half, like so, it might be easier to visualize it as being the neckline. I really love square necklines like this, and I often don't see them in sweaters and knitting patterns, so I'm really excited to see how that turns out. So this next project is one that I would call much more of an end result project than a process project. That is to say, I'm working on this more for the sake of having the finished piece than for the enjoyment of working on it. It's not unenjoyable, but it can be fiddly with the tiny thread and hook that I'm using. This is another beaded chatelaine purse, this time from a 1901 issue of Home Needlework magazine that I found on hathitrust.org. For reference, I'm using Curio number 10 thread in a navy blue color, and I pre-strung 1500 beads onto it before I started. Yes, that part did take a very, very long time. I'm following the image of the pattern rather than the written pattern because honestly I just could not wrap my head around the instructions, which isn't all that shocking with an antique pattern. With no chart given for this one, I drew my own chart onto graph paper based off the image, and I'm just following that. I found the best way for me to work on this was to crochet a chain, join it together in the round, and then crochet in a spiral until I reach the top or as long as I want the bag to be. When I'm done, I plan on just sewing the bottom up, and hopefully that will give me a functional beaded purse. I'm definitely not very far into this project, but so far I am really happy with my progress. I think as I continue it will look even better, and honestly every time I pick this up I just can't stop looking at how shiny it is. With this next project I plan on doing a more in-depth video in the future once I've finished it, so I don't think I'll go too far into the details of this one for now. And maybe just keep it a little bit mysterious so that video isn't completely given away. This project could easily be called the Ocean of Seed Stitch, in both a good and slightly bad way. I love the look of seed stitch, and I've never done any project using it before, but I have found that it can be a little tedious to work. It seems like the fabric takes forever to get any larger, and it sort of makes me wonder if seed stitch actually does grow in length slower than stockinette stitch, or it is completely possible that it's just because of the fact that I have a whopping 292 stitches on my needle right now, and every row takes at least 5 minutes for me to complete. So it really does feel like it's taking forever. This is the project I'm probably most actively working on at the moment out of all of these. That's not to say it's going quickly necessarily, but it's certainly moving at a decent rate. I'll leave it at that for now, and hopefully can get a video out on it pretty soon after I finish it, and I'll move on to the next whip. This project I'm actually close enough to finishing that I think I'll use this video as an excuse to, or rather motivation to, finish it up finally. This is a crocheted hat I'm making using a pattern published in 1920. The pattern calls it a sport hat, but it's basically a cloche with a large folded up brim. I feel like it manages to be a bit funny looking, but also cute at the same time, which is part of what I love so much about this particular era of fashion. I made it in a worsted weight cotton, a mercerized cotton, called Vivity from, yes, once again, Knit Picks. I promise this video is not affiliated in any way. I just happen to be using Knit Picks in every single one of these projects. I do use other brands though, I promise. Instead of making the crocheted decorative rings that the pattern calls for as a trim, I decided to make a simple braid to go around the edge. To make the braid, I used a strand of the main color yarn along with 2 other yarns in a sage color and a cream color. I sewed the braid down to the edge of the brim using the main color yarn and a darning needle, and I just followed along with the main color yarn that was in my braid and stitched right over it following the line that it made. To finally call this a finished project, I'll have to do what I'm sure is everybody's favorite part, weaving in the ends. When the last strand is woven in, I can finally cut it off and call it a day on this project. And of course I will be stashing away my yarn scraps in my dedicated yarn scrap box. Although my yarn scrap collection is growing in volume far faster than I'm coming up with any ideas for how to use them. Right when I was reveling in the feeling of a newly finished project, I realized that I still need to deal with the loose ends of the braid. Evidently, I did not think ahead for how I was going to hide these. I'm just going to pretend that they're a design feature for now because I'd really like to show off the finished hat. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed coming along with me as I went through my whips. Hopefully this video gave you a little inspiration to go through and work on your own projects, and at the very least, seeing how long I've left some things unattended should probably make you feel a little bit more confident about your own work. Thank you again, and bye.